What's going on, y'all? Tyler Deering here, back with another episode of Gate Drop News. Today I sat down with Derek Harris of HP Race Development. He is an engine builder out of Texas. Builds engines for a lot of guys in the area. He's top notch. So today we sat down and talked a little bit about 250 Supercross. Go ahead and subscribe to his channel as well. It'll be in the link below. Had a great time. So a little bit longer of an episode. Let me know what you guys think about this format and if you'd like to see it again. Anyway, let's get right into it. So my name is Tyler Deering here with Gate Drop News, interviewing Derek Harris with HP Race Development. So Derek, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Doing awesome. Before we get started talking about the 250 East preview, tell me a little bit about your motors and kind of what my listeners can expect if they come to you.
Yeah, so I run a performance race shop. We've done nothing but motocross my entire career. I mean, I do other venues like hill climb, flat track, supermoto, things that are in the motocross-based engine platforms.
Mhm.
And we're a national championship winning shop. We won a couple championships with Ty Masterpool in the Super Mini class in 2017. We got a Super Mini 1, Super Mini 2. Last year, Caden Braswell in the Schoolboy 2 class won some championships aboard Our Power. So that was pretty neat. We're looking for big things from him this year. He's actually under the factory gas Red Bull Racing team this year.
Mhm.
So that's what we do in a nutshell. Dyno testing in-house. We do this. I'm actually in my porting room. So the show that we're doing is on the grind. I do my take here in the porting room because I grind in here. It's for Sundays. This particular show will be a pre-race show, but on Sundays, I'm going to do a post-race show with a coffee and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what my company does.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And it's so cool to have somebody that's kind of on the ground in the supercross industry outside of just like a more media-based personality, something that like you guys are on the ground and, with athletes, and you guys understand the more technical side of it with how to get the most out of a motorcycle.
Yeah, it's neat. And actually, I wanted to bring up how cool it was for my listeners and viewers is that you are exactly what our industry needs more of. Because if I'm not mistaken, you've never owned or ridden a motocross bike.
No,
But
absolutely not. And that's one of the crazy things is that I'm just, very passionate about it, but I don't quite have that riding experience that a lot of people in the moto industry do.
well, it's exactly what our industry and sport needs. And I hope that people who watch this understand that, because at the end of the day, the pundits on ESPN or Fox Sports, most of them have never played. The ones who have the big shows have never played pro NFL football or basketball.
Mhm.
They're just journalists. They just have their takes. They're analysts, because the difference between a great athlete and a great analyst is pretty big. They're not the same thing. So I think our sport needs to open up to that you don't have to be a rider to have a fair or honest opinion. And I think that's really, really cool. Our sport. And the other thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that even the majority of people who ride, they're not anywhere in the same category as these elite supercross guys, right?
Definitely
Like
not,
you can even be a local pro, which I've raced too, and whatnot, and you're still light years behind these elite supercross athletes. They're just freaks, right? Like they're unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, man. Well, so
Yep.
I wanted to get to a 250 pre-race show. I wrote down a list because I was trying to prepare for this, and I was racking off names off the top of my head, and I came up with something like 20.
Yeah.
But then I went to the pre-entry list, okay, and I was absolutely floored. I think I play fantasy, this is a fantasy nightmare coming into
Yes.
East Coast, because there are 30 to 35 people who I think probably can make main events.
Mhm.
But obviously that's usually not how it shakes down, just like winners. So I'm going to go off a list really quickly. And if you want to pause me at any point, if you have a comment, let me know. So I'm going to start off with what we know as factory guys. So we have J Mart at Monster Energy Factory, Monster Energy Star Racing. We have Levi, the Chef Kitchen. And then moving on from that team, you're going to have RJ Hampshire. And I did not realize that he had a teammate out there.
Yep. Styles
Robertson. So we
Yes.
haven't heard much from him in a while. He's going to be on that coast. And then you have the Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki boys with Austin Faulkner, Cameron McAdoo, and the rookie Jet Reynolds.
Mhm.
Let's move over to to me, they're a factory team. They're not really factory, which is I'll ask you your take on that in a bit. But Preston Kilroy and Derek Drake over at Bar X Suzuki.
Mhm.
And then you have Max Boland at Factory KTM and Jet Lawrence at Factory Honda. And I believe those are all of the what I would consider manufacturers' best offerings in each, in the class.
Yes, there is. There's actually, I've got a couple sleeper picks that we can talk about later.
Okay, so let me go down the list of guys that are on rides. They're really good, and then we'll talk about them. So we have Cody Schock, Kyle Peters, who are going to be on the Phoenix Racing Honda team. They have one other rider. He's on my list, and I'll get to him. We have Pierce Brown on the Factory Gas Gas. I forgot about him. Factory Gas Gas rider. Mitchell Oldenburg racing for XPR. For Moto Concepts Racing with the XPR Power this year. You have Josh Osby coming in. Cullen Park. He's the other Phoenix rider. Is Cullen Park. Jordan Smith.
Yes.
I want to get back to him. Remind me on that.
Yes.
Okay. We have Grant Harlan. He's a Texas boy. He's really solid. You have Luke Neese, Jace Kessler, and we're also going to have John Short. He's a friend of mine. He's going to be on the show on Sunday. Styles Robertson, as we talked about. Then you have Phil Nicoletti, Enzo Lopes, and Jace Owen on the Club MX Yamahas. Jarrett Fry. You have Josh Barees, who's was a storied amateur for a while. Jeremy Hand, I think he's made some mains. Lane Shaw's out of Texas, made some mains. TJ Albright, I think he's made a main or two. AJ Cannonzero, the famous YouTuber now, doing his Moto Academy stuff. Hunter Yoder, and then I watched this guy in Florida early in the year in January, Brian Sue, HSU. He was fast, really fast. So I was shocked. I think he's going to be surprisingly good. And then I have Zach Williams on my list of people that, potentially could make a main event.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy from a fantasy perspective because, like you said, there are so many guys that could make a main event and not only make a main event, but run top 15 and then miss one the next week. So it's a total nightmare if you're in charge of picking them because, man, I mean, you could have a guy literally run 14th one night and then not even run that badly and miss the main event next weekend.
We might see factory guys not make mains.
I think we might. I mean, I've got the whole list of factory guys here, and there's a couple that have really not impressed me that much, to be honest. Now, the guys like RJ Hampshire that don't have wins, they're going to make main events. We know that. But in terms of like competitive up front, it's going to be a dogfight. And then even competitive to get in the show, it's going to be a dogfight.
So who do you have for this title and why?
So I made a video a couple weeks ago saying my Jet Lawrence was going to win it. And I went off of past results just because Austin Forkner, and I won't repeat myself too much because you can check that video out. But, Forkner is coming off the collarbone injury from last season. Plus, he has been in this class since 2017 and has not won a championship primarily because he can't stay healthy. Not because he's not fast, but because he just can't stay on the bike. So I don't think Forkner is going to be a real challenge. McAdoo's coming off an injury. Jet Reynolds is a rookie. Jay Martin has not been the fastest in Supercross. Like, he's a ringer outdoors. And I think he might be able to get a couple, wins here and there, but I don't think he has the consistency or the pace to keep up with Jet on a Supercross track.
So the question is, did that hurt his confidence? Didn't look like it in that media pre-show that they had. And did it hurt his fitness or did it hurt his, his sharpness on the bike? That's the only question I have with Jet because he is my favorite for the class. But touching on J Mart, yes, he hasn't been the best guy in Supercross. But if you go back to the season, he came back off his broken back, which was with Geico Honda. He was like a 3rd to 4th place guy, like really consistently good that season. I don't recall. I think it was Craig, or I don't recall who was up front that year, but he was actually really good coming off of such a major injury. I think with his veteran knowledge, where he's at in fitness, and then looking at the class, he actually could be a championship contender if Jet cannot stay on 2 wheels. Now, I think Jet is obviously a very smooth rider, but J Mart might be the guy that is just there seconds and thirds, and he pulls what I call a dungy every single week. Yeah,
and that's what it takes because everybody thinks that you got to go win 5 races, but you can win a championship winning 2 races. You just can't crash. And, what we've seen in the 250 West is we've seen guys like Joe Shimoda, who'd been really consistent, lose his foot peg and crash last weekend, hurt his ankle. He's out. And just you've seen through the class guys not be able to stay healthy. And then we've got Christian Craig running away with it. Hunter Lawrence was right in there until he crashed on the whoops last weekend. So it's like if J Mart can stay healthy and Jet even has 1 slip up, that's all it takes. Miss 1 round, finish badly in 1 main event, and have J Mart just consistently get those thirds. It could happen. I don't think it will, mostly because I just want to be right. But I don't know. I'm very interested. I do want to get your take on Styles. Now, I know you said you weren't aware that RJ had a teammate. What do you think of Factory Husky, and do you think that they're going to be competitive this year on the East?
It's a great question. So I just completely forgot he was over on that side of his squad. So when I was looking over the entry list, like, oh yeah, Styles, and he's very good, but we haven't quite seen his best foot forward in Supercross
yet. Although he finished second in Daytona. He did finish second in Daytona in second race.
He was a storied amateur. So we actually had some guys that raced against him and stuff. I mean, he was a top amateur. He should be an elite guy if he can get his game together. I mean, that's who people picked him to be. Hampshire was not confident in his pre-race show or the pre-race press conference about that bike. I don't know if you listened to it, but he said something like, yeah, I got it. It's just been a struggle. We haven't had much time. I finally went out to California and I think we made progress, but it's already laying the framework to have an excuse to not be successsul. If the bike is that bad, and it's a factory bike, I can't imagine it is, but if it's that bad,
like there's just no way.
How do you not have that sorted out? But go race last year's bike. If it's that bad, I just don't think that that's the case. I can't imagine it's that bad. I think the bike's probably, it's good enough to win. On the flip side of that, you have Voland riding the same bike, right? And he's been really happy. He was like, no, I love the bike. We've been good since day one. I'm riding better than ever. And his footage, his whoops look fantastic in off-season videos. So I do think that Voland is the actual dark horse for me in this title. I don't think he can win the title, but he was way faster than I expected him to be last year. Obviously hurt his hip in the whoops. If he can not crash, he was really fast last year, goes out and leads that first outdoor almost convincingly until his bike let go. I think the bigger question at Pro Circuit is going to be, who's the top rider there, Cameron McAdoo or Austin Forkner? Based off the results last year, you're going to have to actually say that McAdoo might be the front runner in that team.
He might be. The thing is, I mean, he had so many crashes in Atlanta. He was crashing in outdoors. He's coming off that knee injury. I don't have the confidence that he can keep it on two wheels because he is fast, but he has to hang it all out there to be fast. Almost like a James Stewart, where it was like he didn't know if he was either going to win the race or he was going to crash trying to win it. So
I agree. He certainly needs to figure out how to calm down that hurricane a little bit. But if he does, he did take a big leap forward last year in actual raw pace. And as they always say, it's hard to acquire pace. He had a lot of it last year. So that was interesting to me. So who do you have for some of your off-the-cuff picks? Who are some of your guys that you think are going to be surprisingly good? Maybe your fantasy picks early going into the season.
There's a couple that I'm looking at. I think Cody Schock has to be at the top of my list. Jumped on a 450 in outdoors and tore it up. I mean, he was so good. Not riding with a factory team, but he was the best of the rest pretty much every week, which is hard to do in the 450 class because it wasn't that 250 class, even though they're combined in outdoors. To ride like in the top 10 and outdoor national on 450 is phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Yes.
So I think that he takes a big step forward. He just honestly couldn't get any luck last year. Like he would get taken out in the first corner, which some of that's not your own fault. I mean, it's Supercross, you're bottled up out of the first turn. But I'm looking at Cody Schock, and I want to say Jordan Smith and Jarrett Fry. I'm kind of sold on them, not going to lie, because both guys were on factory rides last year. Smith at Pro Circuit, Fry at Star Yamaha. I think that they could have the speed to at least get up there and run in that kind of like 4th to 7th range.
Jordan Smith is the most intriguing individual in the class for me this year. He was a solid factory guy. He was a championship contender and in the hunt multiple years. He had some injuries and some little bit of rough luck, but he was fast. He had the raw speed. He was fairly consistent. I'm very curious with him for this one reason. He's going to a privateer effort. It's going to be a very good team, but it is a private offering. We have seen this year that there does not, and I was going to ask you on this, I tell my clients all the time that the engine difference between factory and what we can produce or Twisted or XPR is not very big because the knowledge base has grown from other industries. With four strokes, we have a world to rely on from Indy cars and Formula One and NASCAR and cars. There's a lot of smart people in this space, and dirt bikes is a very small world, a very small segment. So over time, I think that technology gap has closed between the factory teams and the private teams. I actually think the biggest difference is suspension and chassis. And it's not that it's better components. It's that they have a guy on staff 24/7 that works on your bike on the factory team. But if they can get him happy on that bike and happy with that chassis and he's a comfortable place with suspension, which we just don't know, we have to see how the season goes. We've seen with the Vince Freeze moments where clearly a private effort can get good starts. And clearly it has plenty of power to be not only competitive, but at the front of the pack. I don't think I've seen any instances where Freeze's bike looks underpowered to me. He's done every single rhythm he's needed to do. He hasn't gotten pulled down straightaways. He's ripping hole shots. So clearly the private to factory gap is tight. I would actually say if there's ever a year, and it hasn't happened in at least 15 years, that a privateer could win a main event, it would be this year with Jordan Smith or Mitchell Oldenburg. I've got a little insight on Mitchell. I've been told he's been faster in practice on his 250 than he has been on the 450. Go look at his qualifying times on the 450. They've put him right at the front of that 250 pack. So I'd be really, really curious if Mitchell, if he actually brings that speed to the races, could we see probably a heat race win, but could we potentially see, with everything going right, some crashes, maybe the top guys get tangled up, they take each other out, maybe in the first time in 15 years, we see a privateer at least get up on the podium, but potentially bring home a race win.
Oldenburg has shown that in the 450 class, he can survive it. I mean, he's only missed one main event. He missed Oakland. Everything else he made and ran very well. So on the 250 class, if he can just survive late in the season to where 3 or 4 factory guys are out and then get a little bit of luck, he could win by a couple seconds. Like, that wouldn't even be a fluke to me. That would be a genuine earned win. Same with Jordan Smith, same with Jarrett Fry. Now, it could also happen where none of them make it past round 3, and then this is a total moot point. But I would definitely agree that for the first time in a long time, we have factory guys that can do it. And I think what you were saying on engine pace is exactly right. Like, Freezy is not getting pulled down the straightaway. I mean, his bike does not look underpowered whatsoever. I think it's just that feel of the bike. It definitely feels better on the factory ride. But somebody like a Jordan Smith that has been on a factory ride, that can take what he knows from the factory ride to the privateer team, is got to be invaluable to that team. So I could definitely see maybe a podium, kind of a long shot for a win, but I think it could happen. It's not out of the possibility.
Right. It's a very unlikely, but if the cards fell the right way, which we have seen with 2 contenders taking each other out in the first turn or getting into a tussle, it's possible that we can see a privateer for the first time in a long time bring home a race win. And I would love to see it. It's been so long. Our sport really needs that. I'm going to go over a couple names. You tell me if they're going to make the main on night 1.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you a couple random names that are on my list. Do you think AJ Canizero makes the main night 1?
That's a tough one. I don't think he does. To be honest, he didn't make a single main in 450s. I think his bike is okay. I don't think it's great. He also had talked about running a 125 for a couple races, like doing the stank dog thing. And I mean, I think that's great. Let's be honest. He's not in it for the competitive aspect. He's in it for the Moto Academy, and he enjoys it, which is awesome. We need people like that, but I don't think he's going to make first main.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's way behind the 8 ball in training. If he really wanted to do it right, that training would have started in November.
Yeah.
He would have had he doesn't have the time, but I love him. He's a good guy. He's good technique. Definitely check him out of the Moto Academy. Moving down the list, how about a guy like, Lane Shaw? Let's see you were like, know everybody in the sport. So I'm curious, what do you think about Lane?
I'm not super keen on Lane Shaw. I'm going to spin that one back to you because I'm assuming that you have a little bit more knowledge in that sense.
Lane is a Texas boy. He actually raced a couple of my clients coming up, and he did very well at Loretta's and C, and that was about his end of his amateur success. He did, he made Loretta's and stuff, but wasn't like a standout amateur. But he is incredibly gifted at Supercross as compared to outdoors. So here's a guy who could, no offense to him, barely make outdoors, right? But he has made main events in 250 Supercross 2 or 3 years in a row now. I think 2 years in a row. So this is the most stacked East has ever been. I feel bad for some of these private guys because they were thinking go East, they'll be a little stacked. Typically West Coast gets some of the heavy hitters, and that just wasn't the case this year.
No, it did not happen that
way. So I'm going to say yes, he makes a main because he's an amazing starter, which I think is what's going to determine whether or not who makes mains. It's going to come down to starts during heat races. Lane has pulled whole shots. So I think, yes, he'll make 1 or 2. I hope he makes more. I really like Lane. He's a great guy. He's got a great channel. You can check him out. How about the Suzuki boys? Are you familiar at all with Drake or Kilroy?
Yes. No, I've seen them a little bit. The Suzuki bike on the West this year's been okay. Mumford's been doing pretty daggum good. I mean, he's had a couple top 10s, a couple crashes here and there, but I mean, it's not a factory team. I don't think the bike's going to contend for anything more than, a top 10. I don't see him jumping up in the top 5 unless it's late in the season and people aren't there. But I think we could definitely see some mains from those boys. I mean, like I said, Mumford been doing great. He's got a couple career best finishes. He was barely making night shows last year. Just to see that improvement.
That is a huge improvement. That's a great point. I forgot about that.
So I think for somebody like that had all the hype and then kind of flopped last year, to be able to show that much improvement tells me that they've got something working on that bike. And Suzuki's not really funding that bike. Like that is not a factory team. So that's not a new bike, I don't believe.
Right.
So being able to have another year on that, I think is definitely going to benefit these East Coast boys.
Interesting. So I'm curious on the Club MX boys. You have Phil Nicoletti, Enzo Lopez, and one more.
It's Jace, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, Jace Owen. Jace is an amazing starter.
Yes.
He actually basically ended Martin Davalos' career, in my opinion, not in a negative way.
Really
but
took him out.
that
Yes.
start in
Remember
Dallas or Houston,
I think
here
it was
comes
was it
Josh
Salt Lake
wide
City?
open and just blows out
Yes.
Martin Davalos. And that was literally the end of Davalos' title runs. He never competed again after that. But he's a good starter. So I think he can make mains. But again, he's never been an elite level speed guy. But what do you think? Who's the best of the Club MX guys? Who's going to be at the end of the season the most points?
That's a really tough one because the Club MX bike, I'll be honest, I had really high hopes coming in for it with Marchbanks on the West. And I'm not entirely sure if it was like illness. They've talked about on the broadcast that Marchbanks either wasn't feeling great or the bike wasn't quite good or he was injured. But outside of the heat race win in A3, he is really not impressed very well at all. He had a decent run last weekend, but I don't think that bike has as much pace as I originally thought. Just for a throwback, I'm going to say Phil Nicoletti is going to come home the top of the Club MX guys, but I don't expect a ton from them. I mean, even on the West, like Dominic Thury has been horribly off the pace. I mean,
Yes.
like almost missing mains. So I'm not super confident that we're going to have all of the Club MX boys in the main.
So here's an interesting question coming from the non-moto background.
Yes.
In our sport, the bike is the first thing to get blamed, but it's also not talked about in the way that it is in Formula One or MotoGP. You said the bike doesn't have the pace. And it's an interesting comment because a friend of mine, who I hope to get on the show the next time, his comments have been, and I think Jamie at Twist is great, and I think he does an awesome job. So this is not a knock on them, but he feels like their bike is a little off the pace this year from the factory bikes.
Yeah.
He feels like not, and we could be off base here, but he just feels like it doesn't quite have the motor that the elite bikes do in the class. And I personally think, I mean, it's nothing obvious that it's slow. Like there's nowhere that it's just obviously off the pace, but I have seen him really stretching some of the tough rhythms to get out of corners.
Yes.
I mean, that's been obvious to me. He's a bigger guy, but he's really been stretching them. And the Yamaha's strong attributes are in torque and snap and like engine RPM and response. So it feels very responsive when you ride the bike. Anybody who rides it casually would say it's the fastest bike. But if you actually really go drag race it versus other packages, oftentimes it's not. So I think that these pros get wowed by the fact that Star dominates. They go hop on a stock Yamaha and go, wow, this thing's awesome for a stock bike.
It feels good, but not necessarily.
It feels good, but it doesn't necessarily deliver lap times the way that you would think that it would for how good it feels. And I think that that's what they're stuck in. It's not that the bike's bad, but they're not a factory effort. They do have a set budget. It's not like they're, for example, the Bar X team done by Twisted has pulled some whole shots. Mumford is a big kid, right? Club MX, same engine builder, different bike, has not pulled whole shots this year.
Not even close.
Although I guess he did well in the heat race. But interestingly, when it comes down to budgets, Bar X Suzuki running an electric water pump. I don't know if you've seen some footage of that. Club MX Yamaha not running an electric water pump. Same engine builder. So you have to think that maybe they've just invested X amount into budget and then they're at their number. They're going to keep the bikes, they've been reliable. So other than the water pump hose, I mean, that's nothing they can do anything about, right?
Yeah.
So they've been reliable. So maybe they're just at the end of their budget this season, and that's what it is.
One final question. Who is your pick? I've already said mine's Jet Lawrence. Do you have a set pick for the 250 East Coast Championship?
So I'm going to go ahead and say Jeremy Martin because he's the veteran. He's in crazy good shape. He proved that he can get through Supercross healthy the Geico year. Last year was a fluke deal. He got jumped on. Nothing he could
that was terrible to watch.
Yeah, and Denny Stevenson had, I think, a poor take on that. Oh, he should retire. He backed out. Go watch it in slow-mo. A guy in front of him got squirrely. He backed out of it to not jump on the guy, which is what your job is in moto, is to take care of what's in front of you. The guy behind him, who was a rookie, went for it, landed on him, season over. Yeah. So I do think that he's going to be my pick just because of his veteranness, how fit he is. He's on the best bike we know. And he's had a pretty good offseason for what I've heard and seen. He's plenty of time to get prepared. So I don't think I've heard of any like nagging little injuries. He's healthy enough to go out and be successful. So I think Jet's the wonder kid. He's the new modern day James Stewart.
Yep.
Without a doubt. However, I just think he's a little too crazy balls at times. And Jeremy Martin's veteran, knowledge and wisdom is going to come through and win that title.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely see. Looking forward to having you on the show, and hopefully me being a part of your show a little bit too. Glad we could do that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Derek. Really appreciate it.
Tyler, been a pleasure. Hope to see you soon. We'll see you at the shifter cart track. I'm going to kick your asses next time. You've been getting the better of me. So we're going to see you out on the shifter cart track coming up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much, and we will see y'all later.